Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom. All praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aqua that may listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Requai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I kind of wanted to read through this quick story about a king in the line of the southern kingdom that descended, after King Solomon, and then King Solomon had his son Rehoboam, and so on and so forth, right? His name is King Uzziah, right? So I just wanted to read a little bit about his story and in regards to pride, right? So, and I sincerely hope that this lesson is edifying, right? So this story is just going to go into him, a little bit about his reign, some events that which took place, and how did he react to certain things, right? So, and what can we extract from it, right? Just a sense of pretty much there was a point where he becomes very, very prideful, right? And I guess the sentiment is, him being a king, still remaining humble, at the end of the day, right? Just to bring out that golden quality known as humility, right? And that's something Yahweh Shai strongly exemplified, right? So before I get carried away and ramble on too much. This is the book of Second Chronicles, chapter 26. I'll start at verse 1, and I'll just jump down to 6, right? Just for sake of time, right? I wanted to just go through the chapter a little bit here. So it says, Uzziah succeeds Amaziah in Judah, and it says, then all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in the room of his father Amaziah. Right, so I'm just going to jump down to verse 6, and it's going to go into a little bit about some of his essentially a little bit about his reign. So this is verse 6, and it says, and he went forth and warred against the Philistines, break down the wall of Gath and the wall of Jabneh and the wall of Ashdod, and built cities about Ashdod and among the Philistines. And the Most High helped him against the Philistines and against the Arabians, and dwelt in Gerbal and the Menuhims. And the Ammonites gave gifts to Uzziah, and his name spread abroad, even to the entering in of Egypt, for he strengthened himself exceedingly. It says, moreover, Uzziah built towers in Jerusalem, and in the corner gate, and at the valley gate, and turning of the wall, and fortified them. And he built towers in the desert, and digged many wells, for he had much cattle. And it says, both in the low country and in the plains, husbandmen and vine dressers in the mountains and in Carmel, for he loved husbandry. So he was a king. He was very, very talented. He was very, very cunning. And this is the thing about knowing the history of our forefathers, right? Because they weren't just ordinary men. They had a sentiment. They had the ability to. They had different gifts. They weren't just regular Pookies and Ray Rays, right? That's why it's always good to go into the accounts of our different forefathers, right? The scriptures do say that it is the honor of it is the glory of the Most High to conceal a thing, but it's the glory of kings to search out a matter. As a matter of fact, let me pull that out, and then I'll jump back to the story, right? Because it's very refreshing to know this history, because Jake in the world, they call themselves kings, but they don't conduct themselves as such. They're very, very ignorant. That's why the scriptures say, turn thou, O Jacob, that thou mayest be illuminated, right? Be illuminated in righteousness. Know your own history and your own heritage, right? So this is Proverbs 25, verse 2, and it says, it is the glory of the Yahweh Bashan Shai to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter, right? So this is the honor of and the mindset and the mentality of a king, right? I just wanted to make that point real quick. But the point's really about, let me just continue reading. But I just wanted to make that, that side point right there. This is verse 11, and it says, "Moreover, Uzziah had an host of fighting men, and that went out to war with bands according to the number of their account, by the hand of Jael, the scribe, and Messiah, the ruler, under the hand of Hananiah, one of the king's captains. And the whole number of the chief of the fathers of the mighty men of valor were 2,600. And under their hand was an army 300,000 and 7,500 that made war with the mighty power to help the king against the enemy." So essentially, he's in a period in his reign. The Lord's with him. He has all these different accomplishments. He's doing good, right? But look what happens. Hold on, let me get to it. So this is Uzziah. And Uzziah prepared for them throughout all the host of shields and spears and helmets and habergeons and bows and slings to cast stones. As a matter of fact, before I continue, let me get that word. I don't know what that word means. Just bear with me. Just for edification. Okay, so a habergeon. Okay, so it's like it's a sleeveless coat of mail or scale armor, right? So it's pretty much like what a knight might wear, I guess, under under the actual armor, right? Let me see if there's a little bit more here. So it's pretty much like a coat that's worn under the armor, basically, right? Okay, let me go back to the story in regards to the pride. So it says, verse 15, and it says, "And he made in Jerusalem engines invented by cunning men, to be on the towers upon the bulwarks, to shoot arrows and great stones withal. And his name spread far abroad, for he was marvelously helped till he was strong," right? So he was doing very, very good, right? The Lord was with him. He had all this knowledge about agriculture. He had knowledge about the cattle. He was a very skilled, he had very skilled artificers working with him, right? So he was doing, that's Jake, right? When Jake's doing good, when the Lord essentially, they put the Lord on the back burner when they're always doing good for an extended amount of time, right? So this is verse 16, and here's where it gets juicy. And it says, "But when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction, for he transgressed against the Lord Yahweh Bashmel Shai, his power, and went into the temple of the Lord to burn incense upon the altar of incense. And Azariah the priest went in after him, and with him 80 priests, and of the Lord that were valiant men." So 80, so that's about 81 priests in total, right? So verse 18, and it says, "And they withstood Uzziah the king, and said unto him, It pertaineth not unto thee, Uzziah, to burn incense unto the Lord, but to the priests and the sons of Aaron that are consecrated to burn incense go out of the sanctuary, for thou hast trespassed, and neither shall it be for thine honor from the Lord thy power." In the AMP it says, "They opposed King Uzziah and said unto him, It is not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord, but the priests, the sons of Aaron, who have been consecrated to burn incense," right? And that wasn't a role for him to do. "Get out of the sanctuary, for you have been unfaithful, and you will have no honor from the Lord thy power." And Uzziah was wroth, and had the censer in his hand, and burnt incense. While he was wroth with the priests, the leprosy even rose up in his forehead before the priest in the house of the Lord from beside the incense altar. And Azariah the chief priest and the priest looked upon him. Behold, he was leprous in his forehead, and they thrust him out from thence. Yea, himself hasted also to go out because the Lord had smitten him. Right. So, because he was doing something that wasn't permitted for him to do, because he wasn't a priest, right? He essentially the Lord plagued him, right? And sometimes, and as I was reading this story, earlier, sometimes, when you're having moments like that where you're like doing good, sometimes that's why I think the Lord deliberately puts thorns in our, in our walk, whether the thorn is in our environment, whether the thorn is in our household, whether the thorn is in our body, you know, the Lord would pretty much put a thorn, you know, upon us to essentially kind of keep us, it kind of helps to maintain a sense of humility, right? Because, with all these different, I don't want to say the word, for lack of a better word, accolades, for all these different periods of success, essentially, you think you're still, you're good, right? And you don't think you need the Lord, basically, with that type of mindset. Right? So you saw how, you can get puffed up if you're constantly, doing good, for long periods of time. That's why Paul says, I know how to be, a base, and I know how to be abound, right? So knowing how to, there are moments you're going to be doing good, and then there are going to be moments where you're not doing so good, right? Even Job had that understanding when he got smitten, shall we receive good and not evil, right? So let me just grab two precepts here. So let me start off with Sirach here. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can get this in a GNT. This is Sirach chapter 10, verse 18. And it says, the Creator, in the GNT, the Creator never intended human beings to be arrogant or violent, right? Going back to the KJV here, it says, pride is not made for men, nor furious anger for them that are born of a woman, right? So, pride is not something that is really, intended for, men. There's nothing for us to be, especially if you're in a, you're in a dire situation, right? We're in a situation essentially that we need help, right? Especially when we know that we messed up, we know that we're in debt, spiritual debt, so to speak, and we're trying to, have the Lord pretty much kind of blot out, our transgressions, right? There's no need and no value in us being prideful, right? Humility, strongly goes, a long way. And that's, and going back to the earlier point I made about the thorn in your side, and that's something that Paul talked about, actually, you know. So I want to get that, something what Paul said, because that can happen, especially if you're, he was a king too, and you have, you have the Lord's counsel, you had the prophet, I believe it was Zechariah, and hold on, let me double check that. Yeah, it was Zechariah, and he had, that, had good counsel, you had, substance, you had riches, all these different things, right? you had different talents and skills and so on and so forth. It's really all that comes from Yahweh Bashem El Shai, right? We don't really, you know, can't really take the credit per se, right? Um, so I just wanted to get this point about thorns, right? Because when you're doing good like all the time, like that, it can be very it can puff you up, so to speak. And if you have all this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, all these things can essentially inflate you, right? That's why I think like a thorn is like a necessary evil to kind of keep us grounded, keep us in a humble state of mind. This is 2 Corinthians 12, just in regards to the point about thorns. Verse 7 in the AMP, and it says, but because of the surpassing greatness, hold on. Okay, verse 7, it says, because of the surpassing greatness and extraordinary nature of revelations which I received from Yahweh Bashim Shai, for this reason, to keep me from thinking of myself as important, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger from Satan to torment and harass me, to keep me from exalting myself, right? So essentially, like I was saying earlier, it's a necessary evil to kind of keep us grounded, so to speak, right? It's not something, it's uncomfortable. That's what a thorn is. It's something that's very, very uncomfortable. And it doesn't explain exactly what he was suffering from. However, it's still very eye-opening, because it helps to essentially kind of keep our feet on the ground, so to speak, right? So, and concerning this, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might leave me. But he said to me, Yahushua, speaking, my grace is sufficient for you. My loving kindness and mercy is more than enough, always available, regardless of the situation. For my power is being perfected and is completely and shows itself more effectively in your weakness. Therefore, I will all the more gladly boast in my weakness, so that the power of Mashiach Yahushai may completely unfold me and may dwell in me, right? So, it was a necessary thing that, the Apostle Paul experienced to kind of, you have all these different, revelations and, so on and so forth, understanding of all these mysteries and gifts and so on and so forth. But that thorn was kind of, you need that thorn also to essentially keep somebody who has all that understanding, wisdom, knowledge, to basically kind of like keep them anchored down, like a ship in the ocean, so to speak, right? So, let me go to Romans, and I guess I'll just end off with a quick account in regards to Yahushai. This is Romans chapter 12, verse 3, and it says, for I say, though through the grace given unto me, that to every man that is among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, right? And that's where you see where Uzziah fell, right? He thought he can do the role and perform that duty of a priest, and that was not his role to fulfill, right? He had his own role as as a king, right? So, continuing on, and it says, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, as Yahweh Bashim Yahushai hath dealt to every man the measure of faith, right? So, he had his own duty as a king, right? But thinking that you're all good and you're the Lord has been blessing you. You had the heathens paying you tribute. All these different things can essentially puff you up, right? Kind of like with us. we can get very, very puffed up. And it's something also, not to get too candid, but that's something that I've suffered from, when it comes to, like, when you go into all these different books and so on and so forth. And it does create a sentiment of you being puffed up, right? Thinking that you're all this and that. But that's why, going back to the precept I brought up earlier in regards to the thorn, that's why I believe that, I understand why the Lord would put thorns in our walk to essentially keep us, like I said earlier, being anchored, being, you know, to the ground, and remaining in a low state of mind, in a humble state of mind. And that's why, I strongly understand why Yahushua was taught about, the importance of servitude, right? And being in a servitude, having that type of mindset, caring for, caring for another, that's outside of yourself, being subject unto another outside of yourself. It helps to not only exemplify Yahushua, but it does create a sentiment of humility, right? So we don't get too puffed up, right? Because when you think about it, on the outskirts, the majority of our people, don't have access. Well, I don't want to say they don't have access. They haven't been, open. Their minds haven't been opened up to this much understanding, right? They're pretty much, like the scriptures talk about, gross darkness to people, right? They still have those strongholds, upon their minds, right? So, let me get this one. Let me just get this account here. This is Luke chapter 8. I'll start at verse 51, and it says, "And when he came into the house, he suffered no man to go in, save Peter and James and John and the father and the mother of the maiden, and all wept and bewailed her. And he said, Weep not, she is not dead, but sleepeth." How was I speaking? And it says, "And they laughed him to scorn, knowing that she was dead. And he put them all out, and took her by the hand, called, saying, Maid, arise. And her spirit came again, and she arose straightway, and he commanded to give her meat. And her parents were astonished, but he charged them that they should tell no man what was done." So Yahushua had that mindset. It's like, yo, don't tell anybody what I just did, right? And it just shows, that humbleness mindset, Yahushua, exemplify, not, he wasn't bragging and boasting, in his, what's it called, in his power, right? And he always gave glory to, the Heavenly Father, right? When the young master asked him and said, "Why callest thou me good? There's no one good but one." That's the Most High Yahweh. It's roughly paraphrased, right? So, anyways, I guess I'll just, leave it there. But, hopefully, this lesson, was edifying. You can always pick out little nuggets here and there from, understanding and, listening to these, these different kings, the things that they went through, so on and so forth, because all these things are written for our learning, as the scriptures say, right? So, hopefully, this was all edifying and so on and so forth. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.